At a roadside bar in California, a group of bikers gathered late at night. The place was noisy, filled with the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and loud music playing from an old jukebox in the corner. The air smelled of gasoline, leather, and grilled food. The bikers, known for their love of adventure and risky behavior, were in high spirits. They had spent the whole day riding through highways and dirt trails, pushing their bikes to the limit. Now, they were relaxing, sharing stories about their wild experiences on the road. One of the bikers, a tall man with a thick beard, slammed his drink on the table and laughed. "You guys won't believe what I saw outside," he said, his eyes shining with excitement. The others turned to him, curious. "There's this fancy motorcycle parked near the entrance. It looks brand new, custom-made. You can tell the owner really cares about it." Another biker, a younger man with a leather jacket covered in patches, smirked. "Probably belongs to some rich guy who just wants to show off," he said. "I bet he doesn't even ride it much." A few others chuckled in agreement. The group had always prided themselves on being real bikers, riders who lived for the thrill of the open road. To them, a bike wasn't just for display. It was meant to be ridden hard. Seeing an expensive, untouched motorcycle parked outside made them feel like it didn't belong in a place like this. As the night went on, their excitement turned into reckless energy. A few of them started talking about how fun it would be to mess with the bike a little, just to prove a point. "A couple of scratches won't hurt," one of them joked. "Maybe we should test how strong it really is." Most of the group laughed, but a few hesitated. They had done silly things before, but something about this felt different. However, as the drinks kept coming and the energy in the group grew stronger, their hesitation faded. Encouraged by each other, they stood up, ready to step outside and take a closer look at the motorcycle. The moment they saw it up close, their excitement grew. It was a masterpiece, sleek, powerful, and clearly custom-built. The deep black paint gleamed under the streetlights, and the chrome details reflected their faces. The name of the manufacturer was engraved on the side, but none of them paid attention to it. They were too caught up in the moment. One of them reached out and tapped the handlebars. Another ran his fingers across the leather seat. Then, as if it was part of an unspoken challenge, someone gave the bike a small kick. The sound of metal against boots sent a wave of laughter through the group. That small action led to another, and before they knew it, their excitement had turned into something they hadn't planned for. The group of bikers stood around the motorcycle, their eyes gleaming with mischief. The night air was cool, but their excitement kept them warm. The streets were quiet, with only a few cars passing by. Most people had already gone home, leaving the area almost empty. It was the perfect moment. No one was watching. One of the bikers, feeling bold, gave the bike another tap with his boot. "Feels solid," he said with a smirk. Another biker, eager to impress, pushed the handlebars hard, making the front wheel turn sharply. The bike rocked slightly but remained steady. The group chuckled. Encouraged by the laughter, someone else decided to test the strength of the side mirror. He grabbed it and twisted, trying to see if it would move. With a sudden snap, the mirror came loose, hanging by just a wire. A brief silence followed. Then, instead of concern, a burst of laughter filled the air. "Oops," he said, grinning. "Guess it wasn't that strong after all." That small moment changed everything. It was as if an invisible line had been crossed. What started as playful teasing quickly turned into something more reckless. One of them leaned down and scratched the side of the fuel tank with his ring. Another pressed his foot against the tire and kicked, deflating it slightly. The once pristine motorcycle was beginning to lose its perfect look. The energy in the group grew wilder. One of the bikers, caught up in the moment, lifted his foot and kicked the side of the bike harder. The motorcycle wobbled but didn't fall. Someone else followed, striking the other side. The repeated force finally caused the bike to tip over, landing on the pavement with a loud crash. For a second, the group froze. The sound of the bike hitting the ground echoed in the quiet street. It was a heavy, expensive machine, and seeing it lying on its side made it feel real. But instead of stopping, their laughter continued. The moment of hesitation was gone, replaced by the thrill of the damage they had caused. One of the bikers bent down and ran his hand over the scratched paint. "Guess whoever owns this won't be too happy," he joked. Another nodded. "Yeah, but maybe they should have taken better care of it," he added, pretending not to care. As the group stood there, one of them noticed a small fire still glowing on the seat where someone had dropped a cigarette earlier. He quickly stomped it out before it could spread. "All right, we've had our fun," one of them finally said. "Let's get out of here." Without looking back, the bikers walked away, leaving the once beautiful motorcycle in a terrible state. They had no idea who it belonged to. If they had known, things might have ended very differently. But for now, they simply laughed as they disappeared into the night, completely unaware of the trouble waiting for them ahead. The next morning, the sun rose over the quiet streets, casting a warm glow over the town. The roads were mostly empty, with only a few early risers going about their day. At the roadside bar, the bikers from the previous night slowly started to wake up, some still feeling the effects of their late-night fun. They laughed and joked about their wild evening, completely unaware of what was happening just a few miles away. In another part of town, a small crowd had gathered outside a repair shop. People were whispering and pointing at a damaged motorcycle that had been towed in. The once beautiful bike was now covered in scratches, with a broken mirror, a torn seat, and dents along the side. It was clear that someone had treated it badly. The shop owner shook his head as he inspected the damage. "Who would do something like this?" he muttered. "This is a one-of-a-kind machine. Someone must have really wanted to cause trouble." A few moments later, a black car pulled up near the shop. The door opened, and a man wearing sunglasses stepped out. He had a calm, quiet presence, but there was something about him that made people take notice. As he walked toward the damaged bike, the shop owner's eyes widened. He recognized the man immediately. Keanu Reeves, the famous actor and motorcycle enthusiast, had arrived to see the damage for himself. Keanu had always been known for his love of motorcycles. He didn't just collect them. He rode them, built them, and appreciated every detail about them. And this bike wasn't just any motorcycle. It was one of his personal favorites, a custom-built masterpiece from his own company, Arch Motorcycles. He crouched down, running his fingers over the deep scratches and dents. His face remained calm, but anyone who knew him could tell he was disappointed. He took a deep breath, then stood up and turned to the shop owner. "What do you think?" he asked. The shop owner sighed. "It's bad, but it's not impossible to fix," he said. "Whoever did this, though, they had no idea what they were messing with." Meanwhile, back at the bar, the bikers were scrolling through their phones, checking their social media feeds. Suddenly, one of them froze. His eyes widened as he stared at the screen. "Guys, you need to see this," he said, his voice shaking slightly. The others leaned in, curious. On the screen was a post that had already gone viral. It showed a picture of the same motorcycle they had damaged, now sitting in the repair shop. But it wasn't just the picture that made their stomachs drop. It was the name and the caption. "Keanu Reeves' custom motorcycle vandalized outside a California bar. The actor is asking for information on what happened." Silence filled the table. One by one, the bikers realized the truth. The bike they had wrecked the night before didn't belong to just any rich guy. It belonged to Keanu Reeves, one of the most respected and beloved figures in Hollywood. Panic set in. If Keanu had made a public post, that meant the story was spreading fast. People were looking for answers. And if anyone had seen them near the bike last night, it wouldn't take long before someone pointed a finger in their direction. Their fun night had just turned into a nightmare. The group of bikers sat in complete silence, their faces pale as they stared at the screen. The news was spreading fast. Every few seconds, new comments appeared under the post. People expressing their anger, calling the vandals disrespectful, and hoping that Keanu Reeves would find out who did it. Some were even offering rewards for information. One of the bikers, a young man with a nervous expression, gulped. This isn't good," he muttered. Another biker, usually the loudest in the group, now looked worried. "No one saw us, right?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. "I mean, we were alone outside, weren't we?" They all tried to think back to the night before. The bar had been crowded, but when they had stepped outside, the streets had seemed empty. Still, the more they thought about it, the less sure they became. What if someone had seen them? What if there were security cameras nearby? One of the older bikers, who had been part of the group for years, rubbed his face in frustration. "It doesn't matter if someone saw us or not," he said. "That's Keanu Reeves' bike. People love that guy. If he's looking for answers, you can bet the whole world is gonna help him find them." The younger biker's hands shook as he put his phone down. "What if the police get involved?" he asked. "I mean, this isn't just some random motorcycle. This is personal property of a big celebrity. What if they treat it like a serious crime?" The thought sent a chill through the group. They hadn't really thought about it before. To them, it had just been a wild, reckless moment. But now, the reality was setting in. This wasn't just a prank. They had destroyed something valuable, something that clearly meant a lot to its owner. Another biker, trying to stay calm, forced a small laugh. "Come on, guys. It's not like Keanu Reeves is gonna hunt us down himself," he said. But even as he said it, he didn't look convinced. Just then, the door to the bar swung open. A man walked in, holding his phone up. "Hey, did you guys hear about that motorcycle incident?" he asked a few of the other customers. "Keanu Reeves' custom bike got trashed right outside this bar. They're saying it happened last night." The bikers stiffened. Their worst fear was coming true. People were talking about it. It wouldn't take long before someone started asking questions. One of them stood up quickly. "I think we should get out of here," he whispered. The others nodded in agreement, their hearts pounding. They grabbed their jackets and headed for the door, trying not to attract attention. As they stepped outside into the bright morning sun, reality hit them hard. They had made a huge mistake, and sooner or later, they were going to have to face the consequences. The bikers walked out of the bar, their hearts pounding. The warm morning sun felt too bright, almost like a spotlight shining down on them. They climbed onto their bikes, but no one started their engine. Instead, they sat in silence, their minds racing. "Where do we go now?" one of them asked, his voice uneasy. "Anywhere but here," another replied. "We need to lay low until this blows over." But deep down, they all knew it wouldn't just blow over. This wasn't some small incident that people would forget in a day or two. It was Keanu Reeves, a man known for his kindness, his generosity, and most of all, his love for motorcycles. People respected him. And now, they had damaged something he cared about. Just as they were about to start their bikes, a deep voice behind them made them freeze. "Nice bikes." The group turned slowly. Standing a few feet away, dressed in casual jeans and a leather jacket, was Keanu Reeves himself. His dark sunglasses hid his eyes, but there was something in his expression that made them uneasy. He wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. He was just watching them. The silence stretched between them. The bikers shifted nervously, exchanging glances. They had never imagined this moment. They had never thought about what they would do if the owner of the bike actually found them, especially not someone as well known as Keanu Reeves. One of the bikers, trying to keep his cool, forced a chuckle. Hey man, what are you doing here?" he asked, though his voice lacked confidence. Keanu tilted his head slightly. "Just checking out the scene," he said. "Heard something interesting happened around here last night." The group tensed. It was clear he knew. Maybe he didn't have proof yet, but he suspected something. And the way he was looking at them made it impossible to pretend otherwise. The youngest of the group, unable to handle the pressure, let out a nervous breath. "Look, Man, we didn't. He stopped himself, realizing he didn't even know what to say. He couldn't lie. And even if he tried, Keanu wasn't the kind of guy who would fall for it. Keanu took a slow step forward, his hands in his pockets. It's funny, he said calmly. A bike like that, you can't just replace it. It's not just about the money. It's about the time, the effort, the care that goes into making something special. His words cut through them like a blade. They had been around bikes all their lives, but they had never really thought about them that way. To them, a motorcycle was just a machine. But to Keanu, it was something more. One of the older bikers, finally breaking under the weight of guilt, sighed. It was us, he admitted, his voice low. We messed up. Keanu didn't react immediately. He simply nodded, as if he had already known. Then, after a moment, he said something that none of them expected. So, what are you gonna do about it? The bikers stood frozen, their eyes locked on Keanu Reeves. His question echoed in their minds. So, what are you gonna do about it? It wasn't filled with anger or threats, but somehow it carried more weight than if he had shouted at them. For a long moment, no one spoke. The group of bikers who had spent years riding with confidence suddenly felt like kids caught in the act. They had been expecting the worst, maybe a public humiliation, maybe the police getting involved. But this was different. The oldest biker, the one who had admitted the truth, cleared his throat. We didn't mean for things to get out of hand, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. It started as a joke, but yeah, we messed up. We know that now. Keanu nodded slowly, as if he had already guessed their story. A joke, he repeated. And now my bike is in the shop. The youngest biker, looking genuinely ashamed, lowered his head. We're sorry, man, he mumbled. We didn't know it was yours. Keanu let out a small breath, almost a laugh. So if it wasn't mine, it would have been okay. The words hit them hard. They hadn't thought about it that way. Did it really matter whose bike it was? The truth was, they had wrecked something that someone cared about. That was the real mistake. One of the bikers, trying to fix things, stepped forward. Look, we'll pay for the repairs, he said quickly. Whatever it costs, we'll cover it. Keanu tilted his head slightly. That's a start, he admitted. But money doesn't fix everything. The group exchanged nervous glances. Then what do you want us to do? One of them finally asked. Keanu crossed his arms, thinking for a moment. Then his lips curled into a small smile. I'll tell you what, he said. You guys say you're real bikers, right? The group nodded, unsure where he was going with this. Then prove it, Keanu continued. If you really respect bikes, if you really live for the ride, then you should understand what goes into them. The hard work, the time, the passion. So here's the deal. You're gonna help fix my bike. Not just by paying for it, but by working on it yourselves. The bikers blinked in surprise. They had been expecting anger, maybe even legal trouble. But this was something else. You want us to fix your bike? One of them asked, confused. Keanu gave a small nod. With my team at Arch Motorcycles, he said. You'll work with them. Learn what it takes to build and restore a bike like that. And maybe by the end of it, you'll understand why what you did wasn't just about damaging a machine. The group looked at each other. It wasn't what they had expected. But deep down, they knew it was exactly what they needed. One by one, they nodded. All right, the oldest biker said. We'll do it. Keanu smiled. Good, he said. Let's get to work. The next day, the bikers arrived at Arch Motorcycles, Keanu Reeves' own motorcycle company. The large garage was filled with custom-built bikes, shining under the bright lights. The smell of oil, leather, and metal filled the air. Skilled mechanics moved around, carefully working on different parts, shaping raw materials into powerful machines. The group felt out of place. They had ridden bikes for years, but they had never actually built or repaired one from scratch. Now they weren't just paying for the damage. They were about to get their hands dirty fixing what they had broken. Keanu greeted them with a nod. "Glad you showed up," he said. "Let's get started." A senior mechanic, a man with a thick beard and oil-stained gloves, stepped forward. "All right, fellas," he said. "You think you know bikes. Today, you'll learn what it really takes to make one run like a dream." The first task was assessing the damage. The bikers stood around the wrecked motorcycle, now stripped down to its frame. Seeing it like this made them feel even worse. The deep scratches, the broken mirror, the dented fuel tank, it all looked worse up close. "Start by taking off the damaged parts," the mechanic instructed. "We can't fix what's broken until we remove the mess." The bikers hesitated but then got to work. They unbolted the ruined mirror, carefully removed the torn seat, and helped to detach the dented fuel tank. It was hard, sweaty work, but strangely satisfying. "Feels different when you're the one fixing it, doesn't it?" Keanu said as he watched them. The oldest biker wiped sweat from his forehead. "Yeah, it really does," he admitted. After stripping the damaged parts, the next step was repair and restoration. They watched as the experts hammered out the dents in the fuel tank, sanded down the scratches, and applied fresh paint. The bikers helped where they could, learning how much precision and patience went into the process. One of them, while carefully sanding a metal piece, shook his head. "Man, I never thought about how much effort goes into this. We really messed up." Keanu nodded. "Respect isn't just about riding," he said. "It's about understanding what you're riding. Every bike has a story. Every part has a purpose." By the afternoon, they moved on to reassembly. They carefully put the pieces back together, making sure everything fit perfectly. The final touch was adding a new leather seat, stitched by hand. As the last bolt was tightened, the bike looked as good as new. The group stepped back, admiring their work. It was hard to believe this was the same motorcycle they had wrecked just days ago. One of them turned to Keanu. "I gotta say, this was a lesson we won't forget." Keanu smiled. "Good," he said, "because real bikers don't just ride. They respect the ride." The group nodded. They had started this journey full of regret. But now, they had gained something far more valuable: respect, understanding, and a second chance. The bikers stood around the restored motorcycle, their hands still covered in grease and dust. They had spent the last few days working harder than they ever had, learning things they never thought about before. And now, as they looked at the bike, shining like new, they felt something unexpected: pride. Keanu Reeves ran his hand over the smooth fuel tank, nodding in approval. "Looks good," he said. "You guys did well." The senior mechanic chuckled. "Didn't think they had it in them at first," he admitted, "but they learned fast." The group exchanged glances. Just days ago, they had been careless, reckless, thinking only about the fun of the moment. Now they understood the value of patience, effort, and responsibility. One of the bikers, the youngest of the group, took a deep breath. "Keanu, man, we just want to say we're really sorry, not just for wrecking the bike, but for not thinking about what we were doing. We get it now." Keanu looked at them for a moment, then nodded. "Apology accepted," he said. "But remember, respect isn't just about words. It's about what you do next." The oldest biker stepped forward. "We're done with the reckless stuff," he promised. "We want to be better." Keanu smiled. "Then start by passing on what you learned here. Teach others what real respect for the ride means. Keep the road safe, look out for your fellow bikers, and never forget, every machine has a story." The group nodded. This wasn't just about fixing a bike anymore. It was about changing their mindset. As a final gesture, Keanu pulled out a set of Arch motorcycle patches and handed one to each of them. "You earned these," he said. "Wear them with pride. But only if you mean it." The bikers looked at the patches, feeling honored. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a reminder of everything they had learned. Finally, Keanu swung his leg over the restored bike, adjusting his gloves. The engine roared to life, smooth and powerful. The sound was music to their ears. Before he rode off, he looked back at them. "Ride safe, fellas," he said. Then, with a twist of the throttle, he took off down the road, the sunlight glinting off the polished metal. The bikers stood there, watching him disappear into the horizon. For the first time, they felt like real riders, not just guys with bikes, but men who respected the road, the ride, and the people who built them. They had started as reckless troublemakers, but now they were something more, and they weren't going to waste their second chance.